Hey, welcome back to Evil's Comics. This guy right here is Evil Mike, or Mike if you prefer, and I got a review for you today. By request from my dude Nornrad82, this is Image Comics Hexware issue number 1. It's written by Tim Seeley, art by Zulema, Scotto, Lavina, colors by Valentina, Cuomo, and letters by Maurizio, Clausi. I'm sorry if I mispronounced any of those names. I'm pretty sure I did. They're all Italian except for my boy Tim. And before I get into it, let's like, comment, subscribe, please. That helps this channel very much. This is a Mirka and Dolfo cover. Of course, I'm a huge Mirka fan. That's the reason I picked up this book, and the sole reason I picked it up, but boy was I wrong. This was a phenomenal and a great read. So let's get into it. So Hexware, it kind of it throws you into this world. Like, I had read like a small synopsis about, like, you know, it's supposed to be kind of like a Pinocchio style story, you know, with witches and magic and stuff like that. This is supposed to be like our Pinocchio, and we're gonna get there why it's like that. But the first issue is titled The Puppet Tree. And anybody that knows the real story from Pinocchio is very dark, and at the end of that original story, Pinocchio was actually hung from, like, they called it the puppet tree. It was an oak tree. But a lot of those, like, folklore fairy tales, they all had like dark endings. Disney and other companies kind of made them more family friendly kind of thing. So anyways, we start in the book, and I want to say we're in, it says Nor's urban level 1 street level, and it kind of, this part of the book, it's really confusing, but it's just because there's not a whole lot of like lore to set it up. But basically what it is kind of like Coruscant from Star Wars. It's like, you know, it's this massive city, and it has different levels. There is a level of technology, but where they are at the bottom, it's kind of like the slums, and that's kind of basically where the book starts out. They're right in front of a pawn shop, and it's like these two individuals right here, and this man and this woman. They're trying to break into the pawn shop, and there's even this you know, kind of line in the book about how that they during this time on Earth or wherever they are, that they stop using plastic, and now all the shops are using like riot plastic or something like that. And so the guy and the girl can't get into the store. Right after they try and smash the window out, the girl in the group is knocked over, and she's knocked over by this one individual in a cloak, and they realize they start calling her this Witchware. They also use other like terms, like they call her Home Andes. I don't get the terminology, but basically the Witchware thing, she is a robotic, like basically a witch. They don't go into too much detail at this part in the book, but that's basically what our main character is, the one that's featured on the cover. She's basically like a robot that somehow has been programmed or to use magic, something like that. But it's kind of a common thing, like the way these two regular people like come across her, because they start calling her like an older model and stuff like that. Oh, the newer models upstairs are a lot better than this one, and the Witchware is still doing what she's supposed to be doing, but she turns and asks them if they need any help. You know, she tries to help the girl up after she gets knocked down. They do end up using her for help, but it's basically because of her weight. They use her to smash through the pawn shop window, and then they loot and steal the pawn shop. At this point in the book, it does a non-linear thing, and it starts going back and forward. It starts doing a then and a now thing, but it's just catching you up, I guess, with what our main character's gone through. I'm gonna keep calling her that, like Witchware or main character, because I don't know if she actually has a name. I think she has a model number, and that's about it. But there are other characters in the story, and when we go back into the then part of her story, we meet up with the, I guess her previous owners, the Marks, and they're basically just out like on a night, and it's just like kind of a normal conversation. They kind of showcase some of the negativity towards the home Andes or the Witchware, because they kind of show us what she does when she had owners, and she's just basically like using like her robot side. She's like taking the temperature in rooms and asking them if they're cold. She keeps asking them if they'd like a sweater. um Eventually it's a man and a woman that are married, and they have a daughter, and eventually the daughter, and she's kind of the major part of the end story, but I think her name is Gisminder, and Gisminder Marks, and Gisminder and the android are a lot closer than the parents. But as they're walking, like, because they're in like a subway, or like it's like a underground shopping mall or something like that, but they end up running into this one boy. They're out shopping, and he's like, hey, can I carry your bags, and for a little bit of change. And at first the dad of the family's like, nah, and then the mom's like, yeah, go ahead and let him. He starts carrying their bags, and come to find out, this boy, he calls himself the basement boy, but we do get his real name. It is, because the man and the woman is Ren and Karen, and it's actually backwards. Karen is the guy and Ren is the girl. Romeo is his name. But eventually you find out that Romeo and Gisminder are actually like kind of like friends, and he actually brings her like a Walkman with some cassettes, and there's actually a conversation about like how Gisminder listens to all her music like on some kind of digital service, and she thinks it's really cool that he's able to find like cassettes and the real thing and stuff like that. At this time in the book, some guy runs up, and he screams out something, and I'll read it to you. It's bring it down. You try to go to heaven, you didn't earn it. You're all gonna be brought back down to the damn ground. And then after that, it's just a massive explosion that rocks, this shopping center where they were shopping. There is a couple things that go off during the, that happen because of the bomb. The parents survive, but Jesminder is very, very, very damaged. Romeo is the one that actually finds Jesminder, and she says that she had like a large sharp piece of glass that stuck in her, and before she was found, she pulled it out. So she's been kind of bleeding out even before Romero. There is some talk about like him finding the witchware, and when he finds her, he's like, do a spell, and he kind of mentions that, and nothing ever really comes out of that because it flips back to the now present situation. We see how she gets her attire from the cover. It's in the pawn shop. She actually picks up a witch's hat and a witch's cloak, stating at this point that she's actually on the hunt. She's actually looking for somebody, and she's supposed to be invisible, so she kind of puts on the Halloween gear to like go incognito. It goes back to the then portion, and most of this book is just like kind of sped up, but it just goes through how Jesminder doesn't make it through. Like, it kind of states that the doctors tried everything. They even gave her experimental like medicine or procedures or something like that, and it just didn't work. Now I did say that she passed away. The book doesn't like definitely like clarify that. It's just that I mean, as you're reading it, you kind of piece it together. So she might not have passed away as soon as we assume, but it kind of does go through like, days after the explosion. That's what all these different boxes are, and eventually it's just the parents, any parents that lose a child, and how they would be dealing with that. And they basically they power down the witchware. And basically, eventually, she goes into sleep mode, and it just shows that she's in sleep mode for quite, maybe days or weeks or months. It didn't really go into that, detail. But eventually, she turns herself back on. When she turns herself back on, it was a piece of the conversation between the parents about paganism. And she goes on to this, like, where her main directive is to find all books labeled pagan or paganism. And she basically reads and starts learning what is paganism. Um, they go back to the now, and I will say this is definitely where the book got super amazing, because most of this in the beginning was a little confusing. Um, but she enters a bar, our Witchware. She enters a bar, and she actually walks up to this one lady that's surrounded by some people, and she states that, she's like Aisha Pied, previously known as Princess Haramonts of Thebes. You took something that doesn't belong to you, and I'm here to collect it. And that's basically what her mission was. It goes back into the then, and basically after like reading everything she could about the pagan thing, and I think it's over like 200 and something volumes, and she does state a little bit like how long it's I think it was like 1,280 volumes of different paganism stuff. But eventually she does this ceremony, and during the ceremony, since she is like artificial and man-made and basic, but basically she does this ceremony to summon anybody, and that's why she read so many different volumes, and she's not specifically calling out to a god or all the gods or demons, and she's calling out to anybody that will answer. And basically she does this, she states this request that she's not trying to inherit a soul or be given a soul, but she actually wants to buy one. She wants to make a deal with somebody, and somebody does answer him. From this point in the book, it does show like these little like red bubbles, and that's whoever is talking to her. They never really show besides the fire that appears next to the bubble, but the fire does appear, and he starts talking to her, and he basically says, never in his like long existence has anybody like an artificial thing asked for a soul. He even kind of makes a joke about like I think if a vacuum or a sawhorse asked for a soul, I'd probably give it to him, but it's never been done. So we do find out that a bargain is done. The book goes back to the now, and we see that the Aisha P, the lady that our Witchware is after, and kind of transforms into this like old, like nasty looking like hag of a witch type thing, and they start fighting. The the android Witchware, she kind of states that they're not programmed to fight or something like that, but during the paganism like discovery thing, she started watching cartoons, and specifically like fighting cartoons, and we find out that she is able to fight. During the fight, she does end up losing both her arms. They're ripped off by the witch, the real witch, using like magic and her strength or whatever. And then it goes back into the then, and it's more along there is one other thing. The hag, while she's fighting our Witchware, she gets bashed in the back of the head by somebody, and her eye even pops out. We don't ever see who the person who knocked her out, but I think it's the Witchware. It's the way the paneling or whatever. But I don't know, it doesn't really show that. But it goes back into the then, and we go back into the ritual with the whoever she was able to summon. I want to say it's a demon, or maybe Satan himself, we don't know. But he just states at this point that he will give her the soul, and in exchange for that, she's going to track down people that have escaped from like hell and basically need to go back, they deserve to go back, and that's going to be her deal. Is if she collects so many, she will be able to buy a soul. But it does say that that's not the only thing she'll be doing. The book jumps back to the now, and we see that our Witchware has lost her arms, but that don't matter, because this is where we finally see her use some of her magic, because she like kind of states that her not having the arms doesn't really like stop her. And at this point we kind of see that she makes these like magical arms, like wings, or it's just a whole bunch of magic to come out of it. At that moment, we see that like the hag witch that the dude Romero had ran up, and she was able to grab him, and that's when she makes the the arms, the magic arms come out or whatever. And we don't see the conclusion to that part because it basically goes back into the then story part, and it's basically Romero, the basement boy, finding our witchware, and while she was doing the the ritual, after the ritual, it basically like knocked her out, and the demon or like Satan or whoever's talking to her, or I mean it could be somebody good, and it just looks like, you know, kind of menacing Bubbles, but basically, you know, he states some other stuff like, you know, that she should have been listening to, and basically whoever summoned this specific demon, they're gonna suffer, and everybody that's connected to, you know, said person is gonna suffer too. And he kind of makes it state that even though she's not a real person, that it's gonna stick regardless. And that's like the last thing that this thing says before it says to be continued. But it's basically as well as those beside them will suffer, and that's what we get for this issue. No, you know. No talk about what's coming, but they do show this little image of our witchware in like this glass paneling or whatever with the werewolf behind it. My thoughts, it was amazing. Once it got to the part where like you actually got to see a little bit of her magic and stuff like that, the book for me propelled a whole bunch more. The beginning of it was really confusing because there's a whole bunch of brand new words and terms and uses of those terms that just don't make any sense until you get a little further into the book. But my recommendation, it's a great start to a story. It's a fantastic read. The art was pretty dope. There was a couple, you know, parts that I wish would be more clarified, but it could be like an issue 1 thing where we're going to get some more in issue 2. Hey, but that is my review. Thanks to Normrad82. His link will be down below. Please go give him a like, a sub, you know, all that good stuff. I have more reviews coming. I will see you next time. Yeah.